What is the economic model? How does this functions? Why do you think brands are they also going back to that old school of paying once and then using it forever?
Right. If you look at a cloud network or cloud platform like AWS, they have hundreds of different services. Storage is just one of them. Now, if we have these permanent clouds, ultimately what forms is a permanent web, or sometimes what we call it the permaweb.
The problem of never expiring domains and how they are shaping the whole online entity problem here with this
is that it gives people access to names, that data, as well as your identity that exist in this permanent cloud.
I think what you're doing has a bigger purpose rather than just what currently we are thinking. So if that can be a narrative shift, I think people would definitely would like to move to a permanent solution currently.
Whether that's NFTs or building an app or front end and your data is on centralized platforms that can just go away if you forget the bill or something happens, your project goes away. That's a mistake.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Voice of Crypto, a podcast where we talk about crypto, Web3, NFT and everything in between. And today we have a very exciting guest, Phil, with us. Hi Phil, welcome on the show.
Hey, good morning, Abhishek.
Good to see you, Phil. So Phil, if you could quickly, I can see a lot of guitars at your background. Are you a musician, or was that your past life role before you got into Web3?
Yeah, pretty much. Past life. I was never formal musician. I actually play a lot more drums than guitar these days, but doing lots of building, of course, too.
Amazing. So Phil, if you could just quickly give us a quick intro about what you do, what you used to do before getting into Web3, what you are building currently, and where are you in the journey?
Yeah, so I'm the founder and CEO of Permanent Data Solutions, and we've been building all kinds of protocols, products, infrastructure that leverage permanent storage, which is something that the Arweave blockchain provides, and something we've been building on top of for almost 5 years now, coming up this August. Before I got into becoming an entrepreneur, I was in enterprise IT, doing systems architecture, enterprise architecture. Building things on premises, in the cloud, some IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, all that, the whole breadth of kind of enterprise, the enterprise IT world. Doing work for a Big Four audit firm. And I think it was in 2018, I had kind of gone down the blockchain and crypto rabbit hole. I first discovered Bitcoin, Ethereum. Ethereum particularly struck me as being like, wow, a world computer, like that sounds really cool. Is that something I could like run in my house? So I started mining it. I built a GPU rig, and again, my background is more like infrastructure and like putting together systems. So that's what kind of really scratched the itch and made me go just super deep. And it was really in early 2018, that's when I kind of discovered Arweave, which is a blockchain that was purpose-built for storing data. And again, my background, I was dealing with a lot of things that were storing data, obviously a lot of different systems. And, the premise of Arweave was very different. It wasn't subscription-based. It was kind of pay once, store forever, right? You're paying to kind of own that block space that's securing your data for the lifetime of the chain. So that was super interesting to me. And, I started exploring, being an operator of Arweave miners. I grew with that community for a couple years. And it was in 2020 was when I was like, hey, maybe this is something I could do. A super, the passion had really increased since I had discovered it. I wanted to just get this permanent storage, this kind of magical technology into the hands of everyone. So that's when I, kind of quit my career, jumped into Web3 and haven't turned back since.
Journey, Phil, from Big Four to the Web3 world. I think that's quite a journey. While I was going through the website, I found something called as permanent cloud. So if you could explain it to us, like we have heard about cloud, and you said that a concept in which you don't need a subscription based model. So is it going back to the old style of Microsoft when you used to pay like a lifetime subscription, or how does this functions, and what is the economic model? How does this functions? Why do you think brands are they also going back to that old school of paying once and then using it forever?
Yeah. So, when I had first really started this journey, I started with making an app. We started with an app called Arweave, and had a really simple premise. It was, this Web3 Dropbox that used Arweave. So there were no subscriptions. You just paid one time to store your public or private data forever. And it worked, just like your Dropbox app. And through that journey, we kind of discovered that, all right, there's, this blockchain is great for storing files. It's a great hard drive. It's a great, S3, or, it's a great storage layer. But there were still some needs above that, right? If you look at a cloud network or cloud platform like AWS, they have hundreds of different services. Storage is just one of them. So as we were going through building Arweave, we saw the need for, other infrastructure and services like caching, indexing, querying, domain names, and these other kinds of things that really made for a kind of a full cloud services network. So we're like, okay, well, maybe, there could be not just a centralized provider of these things, but a decentralized network of these different providers that are, doing all these different services for apps like Arweave and the other, thousands of different applications that have been uploaded to Arweave, and really create this full cloud network of things that developers, builders can use to really make rich, modern apps like Arweave. So it's kind of like we started at the app level and then saw the need for some more infrastructure. So I kind of like almost come full circle of going from, my enterprise IT is technical infrastructure stuff. I went to like retail app to now back to, more on the infra side of things lately. But yeah, so, because you have this permanent storage layer and now you have these services that sit on top, we really like to call it a full permanent cloud network, right? You figure the internet is really a web of different clouds, I like to say, right? Clouds being AWS, Oracle, GCP, so on and so forth, Microsoft, Azure. And all of them together makes the web, makes the internet. Now, if we have these permanent clouds, ultimately what forms is a permanent web, or sometimes what we call it the permaweb. And that's really now an internet of applications, pages, infrastructure that are all dealing with this primitive of permanent data, data that's immutable, has a clean, trail of provenance to who uploaded it, timestamp, tamper-proof, all those things. You have an entire web built on that. And now you have a web that, fundamentally can't forget things, fundamentally knows who uploaded what, when, all those kinds of things that we're missing on the internet, the non-permanent web today. So yeah, I don't know if that kind of maybe explained kind of, the Arweave, the storage, how it forms this whole permanent cloud network that we like to call RIO. And yeah, how that kind of fits into this broader permanent web, which is really kind of the whole vision of what we're working towards.
Very interesting. I think that's a new thing which I've learned today about permanent cloud. What is a permanent cloud? And moving on to my next question is, so your product is built on Arweave, and what makes Arweave fundamentally different from other blockchains when it comes to data storage? And what would be the closest competition of Arweave as well, for users who want to know that as well?
Yeah, so I think the fundamental difference with Arweave, and one that's still, since it launched 7 years ago, right? 8 years ago, 7 years ago, there really hasn't been a competitor to do the same exact fundamental thing. But it's this pay once, store forever concept, right? And when I had first, discovered this in 2018, that was the thing. I was like, okay, well, how does this really work? And sure, the protocol that it operates on has gone through changes since 2018. But there's a few key principles, right? So one is, when you upload a file or make a transaction, you have to pay the Arweave token. And, it's like your gas fee, right, for just dealing with a blockchain. A portion of that fee goes to the miner or the node to accept the transaction and transaction headers and the data and all that stuff. A bigger portion of that fee goes into this protocolized endowment, right? So you figure your money is going into an endowment. That endowment isn't getting invested in funds or the S&P, whatever. It's solely controlled by the Arweave protocol itself, by code, by all the miners running the code. It's controlled by that and pays for your storage costs for what the core team, Forward Research has calculated 200 plus years of storage. And that's based on the fundamental principle that hard drive space or hard drive costs are declining over time. Right? Figure we're making more advancements in hard drive technology. We're making them more denser. We're packing more disks into servers. All of those kinds of things are happening. So that's why this endowment can perpetually pay for your storage. So that, endowment-based model has not been replicated. It's very simple, and it's, it really hyper focuses Arweave miners and nodes to just replicate data, right? It's a very clean incentive. They're not trying to stuff all these different, all these different functionalities into that, which I think is really good. I know there are other platforms like, like Filecoin. I know people like to compare to Arweave a lot. That's, temporary storage. I know they don't have this one, pay one, store forever model, which is very simple to understand and price out. You have to make different deals with, I guess, different miners. There are other protocols that I think are really good and provide, a good, aspect for decentralized storage in general that are compared to Arweave, like IPFS. One of the big differences there is IPFS. There's no incentive for people to actually store that. It's really just a hash of the data and a way to access that, which is very convenient and good for file sharing. And I know a lot of other platforms are leveraging that, but still there's a fundamental difference between that and Arweave, where Arweave you get, this timestamp, right? That's based on the consensus of the whole network. And you have the provenance to who uploaded it and those kinds of things. But yeah, I think nowadays there's lots of storage platforms out there or chains claiming to be it, but there's really only one permanent storage that is Arweave.
Interesting. So I think that's a good mode which you guys have, because if that is the core utility, core purpose of a chain, which I think as the chains grow, as projects start growing, they just try to serve every customer. But I think it's always good that when you have a core focus, you focus on that, and then obviously things come in place. So interesting approach. And Phil, you said you have been you come from a digital architecture background from Big Four. So this is a question which I ask all my guests. Do you remember that aha moment when you decided that I need to move out of this Web 2 world and get into Web 3? Do you remember that specific moment, Karan?
That's a really good question. I don't remember a specific moment. It was more like a series of moments, and I'm sure many founders might say that. Right? Like I already said, like, okay, discovering whatever blockchain was definitely a big moment, and investing in it and learning, doing that arc, I think many people have followed, was definitely a big moment for me to really question all the things I was doing. Right. So it's like that happened. And finding Arweave was a big moment. I think there was a time when I was in the first Arweave community DAO. So that was another thing, like, okay, I have my day job, but I'm really starting to spend more time now doing this. I think when coronavirus started happening in like early 2020, pandemic, whatever, that was another thing that maybe just started questioning all the things, right? And I had already met, the Arweave team, the founder, Sam Williams. I already knew that they were the real deal. I guess maybe it was, I don't know, March of 2020, April or so, and, really started thinking about like, okay, should I do this? I definitely remember trying to think of the name of the company, like that kind of thing. Maybe once I was thinking of names of companies, Permanent Data Solutions, that's when the moment had already hit. But it was really when Forward Research, the Arweave team, the core team, they had started doing incubators, and they called it the Open Web Incubator, I think it was called, and it was $100,000 up for grabs, something like that, and attention of investors. So I was like, okay, let's make a little app and make ArDrive, basically, because I had a lot of familiarity with OneDrive for Business and Microsoft 365 and collaboration, document management, all that stuff. So maybe that was like the last series of moments, like, okay, because I got to school for computer science and I hadn't done any development since college. So I think getting in the act of developing again, writing code, maybe was like the last aha moment, like, yeah, this is awesome. This is great. You can just think of something and build it, right? Like, didn't have
there is no looking back now. Yeah.
Didn't have, as I,
Correct. Interesting. I think that's how a lot of founders get into business. That's how they start. And you're right. I think there is no specific date. It just starts brewing in your head. Then you start thinking in that direction, and then suddenly things just turn up, and then you just realize that you are in the world of Web3. And because nobody planned to get into Web3, I'm sure. Yeah, as a kid, nobody had any idea that what Web3 was.
No.
But moving on to my next question, this is a question which I want to understand, and I was reading it somewhere. I come from the timelines when you used to buy those Microsoft CDs, probably 92, 93 every year they used to, and that was a one-time payment, right? You just used to buy that CD and then use it for a year probably, and if you want to update it, then you should. But I think in last 10, 15 years, it has started happening that these corporates have started seeing that you can get more money out of a user if you start building, because that also gives you a continuous revenue flow, so you don't have to depend on a one-time sale. But having said that, which is a model which and currently, if I go and see my credit card, I think there are at least 5 or 6 places where I'm just paying a subscription. Probably 1 or 2 of them I don't even use it, and I don't get to know about that till the time I check my. So how does Arweave's whole pay once and store forever model actually works, and is it economically sustainable? How does it scales up? I would like to know more about the economics of this whole model, and can this be applied on other models or other businesses as well? What's your approach here?
Yeah, so I think I had gone through how Arweave's endowment works, and how you pay for that storage over a really long period of time, right? It's like leasing versus buying, so it costs more, right? So if you were to compare your monthly subscription for OneDrive or iCloud, whatever, that is going to be way cheaper than storing that equivalent amount of data, because ultimately Arweave permanent storage, it's a premium product, right? You're getting long-term storage, but you're getting provenance and immutability, and it's this open data lake now that can be accessed and used by things way beyond what you could ever think of. So you're getting more for that, but it's like buying versus renting. Now there are other things to consider in the economics. So sure, you're paying for the storage. And I just said, yeah, Arweave, the protocol, the miners are hyper incentivized to replicate data and be the hard drive. There's other things that an app might need that that the Arweave miners aren't incentivized to do. So like provide a high quality of access, right? Or create an index of that data, or allow apps like ArDrive to query for it, or to have an easy way to name any piece of data. Those kinds of things don't exist at that base level, let alone any kind of like smart contract platform, or really any compute layer where you could do advanced business logic or anything like that. But yeah, so, and there's, let alone the storage layer doesn't, have incentives for smart contract logic, stuff like that. So this is where other parts of this kind of permanent cloud stack come into play, and the incentives that they may have. So for our IO network, here's where we're kind of like that edge layer, right? Where, we have different building blocks of cloud services that all have different incentive models at play. So, for example, the naming system ArNS, that's really one of the biggest features of the network that we launched with. And that's a way to assign a friendly name to any identity in Arweave, as well as any piece of data. And this came from the need of, like, we were just sharing links, and you share a link and it's like, permagate.io or arweave.net, / a transaction ID. And we're like, this is really ugly. Like, who's going to share links like this? So we came up with this concept of the naming system, and now you assign a friendly name, and you have that friendly name dot any of the gateways that are on the RIO network. So you can have Abhishek that could point to your permanent Linktree page or your portfolio, whatever. And now you can go to abhishek.arweave.net .permagate.io. There's 600 plus different gateways on the network. So now this name system, we're like, all right, this is great, but now how is this permanent, right? Like, how is this, we're saying this is a permanent cloud. Like, how does this fit into the big picture? Well, ultimately the name system itself is all stored on Arweave, right? So, it's using this base layer. And then we created an incentive model around it so that when you purchase a name similar to Arweave, you're paying into the RIO network protocol endowment, which then pays for the service of these names by the different gateways in the network. Basically, there's, we have our own model for gateways to kind of observe and reward one another, to collect the reward, so to speak. So we're trying to follow similar models where, you can get something and fully own it, and nobody can take it away. And, it's kind of no delete button, so to speak. Now, for ArNS, for the name system, you can lease a name on a yearly basis. Maybe you don't want to pay this big premium for permanently buying it, so you could lease it. I totally understand what you're saying around, like, for subscription fees, there's a reason why every company has subscriptions. But there are also pay-as-you-go things. Like, I'm in New Jersey, I use Easy Pass. It's pay-as-you-go. You don't use it, you don't have to pay for it. So I think that model does exist. The other part of the story is access. So that's another thing that, when you store data on Arweave, you're not paying, for petabytes of download of that information, right? So that's another aspect that the RIO network provides, that we're still trying to fully work out the incentives models for. Really trying to make something that's sustainable in the long run, that follows those same principles of permanence and kind of pay once. But there's certainly use cases or kinds of services that might just benefit more from a subscription or like a micropayment type model.
Absolutely. No, I think it's also because these Web2 brands have started doing this SaaS model, they've started doing the subscription model, they make more money, and it's customer who's losing the money. As I said, a lot of time you just pay for subscription and you never even use it. But it's like just take as much as from you can from the consumers. I think that's the model which these brands have been using it. But no, I mean, interesting model in which you guys are working. And let's talk about censorship now. I mean, that's a topic for which all of us are in Web3. We all are here to understand how it functions. How can we keep our privacy as well? So how do you guys ensure that uncensorable, tamper-proof access to information while avoiding abuse? So what are some of the principles on which you guys function, and would be happy to hear that.
So yeah, it's maybe a couple sides to that, right? So like, going back to SaaS companies charging subscriptions, they could stop that subscription. You could forget to pay, or, something could happen and, your data access gets cut off, right? So they really control that, right? If you have the data, you can control the access to it and monetize however you want. Versus platforms like ours and other, decentralized systems, they're not controlled by any single party. And, that means in our case, if there is a gateway that is denying a user service, I think there's 600 current active gateways right now. If anyone is denying you access, there's 599 of other gateways to go to. Likewise for Arweave nodes, there's, many on the network. So having no single point of failure, having this resilience of information and of data and access points is like really important for us, and something that we're trying to ensure goes in the right direction. So like, again, we've launched in February. We really want the network to be decentralized, to be resilient and distributed. So that doesn't mean having a bunch of nodes in one data center or in one region or jurisdiction, because that's the other side to kind of the censorship resistance and the content moderation aspects of both the Arweave network as well as any layers above it, like RIO, right? Gateways are the things that you're actually accessing to read and write your data, to get your data in and out of Arweave, right? That's why we call it RIO, Arweave in and out. So the gateway is responsible for moderating any content it might deem necessary. So for example, maybe a user uploaded a fake Outlook.com site to try to get passwords from somebody else. That gateway could say, I'm not going to serve this, right? That gateway might not get the reward, because for ArNS, we reward gateways for serving ArNS names, and the protocol picks which names to observe, and it's, this impartial system, right? So the incentives work against the gateway to moderate, but they can. You basically say, I don't want the reward first because I don't care about serving whatever the thing is. Likewise for Arweave nodes. Arweave nodes operate on what's called proof of access. Every block, you have to prove you have access to historical chunks, or historical information. So if there is something you don't want to store, you can remove it. Any Arweave node can remove that. It's just if it's ever called upon to mine the next block, they wouldn't be able to participate in that reward. So it's like the protocol really just tries to incentivize everything, but the operators of the nodes can determine what to serve or store. And I think that model is way fairer or way more democratized than like a single company or jurisdiction, having control over the user or their information.
Great, Phil. So tell us more about your Arweave name system or ARNS, and how do they solve the problem of never expiring domains, and how they are shaping the the whole online entity problem here with this, guys. So let us know about that.
Yeah, so really the core idea for ArNS is that it gives people access to names that don't expire. They can't be seized by anyone else or taken down, and it points to data as well as your identity that exists in this permanent cloud, that exists in this ecosystem of apps and infrastructure dedicated to permanent storage. So that's like the core idea. And I might have already gone through some of this, but that really stemmed from sharing links to data on Arweave. You share like a gateway domain name like arweave.net/ a transaction ID, a long hash. And we wanted to improve that, right? I'm sharing this link on LinkedIn specifically. I'm like, people aren't going to click on this to, my decentralized permanent homepage. How can we improve that? It's your name on the permanent web, right? So we wanted to make sure that we had a system to apply a friendly name to this transaction hash, but allowed it to not work on a leasing system. To support this, we had to come up with kind of our own version of an endowment. So when you purchase an ArNS name, you spend the RIO token. It goes into this endowment that then pays the gateways in the RIO network for resolving and serving that name. And sure, there's still a leased option because, owning something versus leasing it, it's a more premier choice, right? It's paying a lot more upfront. So we wanted to still have something a little bit more affordable. Maybe you don't want your domain name to be permanent because you're hosting something for an event and you just need it for a year. So even though all the content is permanent, it's immutable, can't be changed, the name acts as this mutable pointer to this content. Furthermore, the name acts as your identity, right? Like if you look at the internet today, I don't know if you have your own domain name, but that's really the identity for not just a user, a person, but entire brands, companies, right? Google.com, Microsoft.com, Nike. These are all huge domain names that act as their email address, their authentication for logging into their internal systems. They're baked into so many different levels. And that's really what ArNS does as well. So if you have the name Abhishek, I could send tokens to it, right? If you log into an app, it could, detect your wallet and load your name as your profile. So it doesn't just act as, your domain name for permanent content, but also for your identity. And yeah, this is one of the core features of the network. And again, the great thing about it is it provides resilience beyond any single top level domain. So there's 600 or so gateways joined on the network, each with their own unique domain name. So the name that you purchase, Abhishek, is available in front of each of those gateway domains. So abhishek.arweave.net, .permagate.io, 600 plus domains. So yeah, really resilient system and something that, we really feel that fits into the whole big picture of this permanent web, right? Imagine if you were going to IP addresses instead of friendly names for sites.
Correct. I know. I mean, I feel it absolutely opens it actually levels the ground for even the smaller brands. So I don't know if a lot of people, and I don't remember if it is still there, but Google's parent company was fighting to get a domain called alphabet.com. And it was with some, I think it was with a car brand, and probably they have still not got it. But yeah, I mean, it makes life simple because if you have bought it once, it remains with you for the rest of your brand's journey as well. So interesting approach. One more question which I have while we are discussing about this, Phil, is when you're talking about whether it is a developer or is it a creator to new businesses, who are the biggest winners from a permanent decentralized cloud? We spoke about brands and businesses, of course, but what happens to developers? How is it helping developers as well when you have a permanent domain for you?
Well, developers now, you can host your content, you can host your app, your front end, your LLM, any raw data for your app or platform for a one-time payment, right? You can now assign it an easy to access name, that mutable pointer, which now gives you, we call them undernames. So it's kind of like a subdomain space underneath that name that you as a developer can leverage with really simple to use APIs and SDKs. And it really kind of acts as, what we've seen most recently is just your one-stop shop for hosting decentralized front ends that can't be taken down, that are spread around the world and totally resilient. Now, the gateways themselves do provide other services that developers can use. It's beyond just a place to host static sites, right? Sure, the gateways will cache that and resolve them, but they also have an index that could be leveraged to query and find any of your permanent data. And yeah, there's just other tools available in the broader ecosystem that you can leverage for all kinds of different things. And I think front end hosting in particular is so attractive because sure, you can get a nice domain name, and it's a new domain name system, right? So there's a lot of names available. But it's, very, very cost effective, right? Names, or I should say, websites, apps are very low amounts of storage. Like we've deployed the ArDrive app onto the permanent cloud, right? We use ArDrive itself to deploy the ArDrive code. And so now the ArDrive app, you can go to ardrive.arweave.net, ardrive.any of the gateways. And it's, pennies for us to host that one time, to pay one time. And now we have every version of the ArDrive app, there immutably stored. So users, if they wanted to, or even us, if we've rolled out, a version that has a bug or something, you can always go back to the historical version. So yeah, I think that's like a really good use case for devs today, as well as just uploading data and leveraging it for all kinds of different downstream applications. I think it's that's maybe the developer, someone familiar with SDKs, APIs. I think even just for the regular creator, there's tools for one-click publishing, right? ArDrive, I just mentioned, is an easy to use app to get your front end on there. There's others like MetaLinks, which is like a link tree builder. There's RLink, which is actually kind of like a Vercel emulator almost, which just plugs right into your GitHub repository. And yeah, it's, we're not trying to just hit the developer category. There's lots of creators, artists out there who can benefit from this stuff too.
Absolutely. So Phil, I mean, this also happens a lot of time when a brand or when you create a tool, but how people start using it, it's completely different from what you envision. So, and sometimes it's also a good use case because then you start seeing some other utility which you might have never even thought through as a developer. What are some of the interesting use cases which you never thought, which people are building or they can build on r.io, and which is currently happening, as, I mean, people are using it in a different use case altogether, which you never imagined?
So I think ArNS in general, to be honest, is something that I never imagined. So now this is something, sure, we built, but I talked about like some of our journey before. Even when, forget it, ArDrive, when we first came out with RIO, we didn't have this idea for ArNS. So I think that's something that, is just in general, something I never imagined. DNS is, I've worked very deeply with DNS my whole career, and now it's like we're doing things fundamental, that help it. So I think that gives me goosebumps because it's like, wow, something that's really innovative that, we didn't intend to build that we have. I think some of the things that are getting built on top of it, are pretty cool. So, and that might range from just all of the thousands of simple homepages, people just exploring and taking their own personal brand onto it, to things like, DRadar, which is like this decentralized, airplane tracking site that's storing all their data and surfacing it through an RNS app. There's this other app that I started playing around with called Roam, which just shuffles through any of the data that's on Arweave. So there's billions of transactions on Arweave. All of them can be accessed through RIO. And it's just a simple app. It's just a one-click button. You click next or shuffle, and it just shows anything. So that's something you just can't get on, the internet today. You can only get on this kind of immutable data lake that is Arweave. Another thing that came out, which I thought was, again, a really cool, way to try to onboard more users. So not necessarily something, wow, this is some innovative thing never heard of, but a team called Load Network just released like an S3 compatible API. So you can basically just change, the URL for, if you're using S3 to, read and write data in AWS, you can just change the URL, and now you'd be pointing to a system that can automatically back that up to Arweave through the RIO network. So that's cool to see. Like, all right, now maybe some more serious enterprise adoption could occur, because that, again, my background has been in enterprise. We're not really focused on enterprise sales or adoption, but now like these tools are really starting to come together to support that. And then again, I don't want to get too deep on what gives me goosebumps, but there's this came out, it hit its mainnet earlier this year, but there's this decentralized compute platform called AO, which is kind of, built on top of Arweave and leverages, the RIO network to, read and write data. But it's this whole compute platform, that, allows all kinds of, smart contracts to be deployed, and ArNS is actually built on top of this AO compute layer. So, really excited about the scalability potential of that, and some of the new things coming out there. That could be probably a whole separate podcast to talk about AO. But that's really allowing all kinds of things from, not just what we're doing, but to gaming, to AI and to GPU usage, all kinds of fully homomorphic encryption, all kinds of stuff, but built into simple smart contracts. So that's going to open up a lot of doors, I think, too. But this is why I got into this industry, right? Because of these goosebumps, because of these like kind of cool things that maybe they're really interesting sounding, but they don't last very long, or maybe there really are something really different and powerful.
Absolutely. I think we all are in this industry because we look at these innovations and which nobody has probably even thought of, and those things are coming every single day. Probably who would have thought about a DeFi 10 years back? Nobody had even thought about that. Anybody can go and they can just do it. But since I was talking about 10 years back and DeFi, I was talking to some of my friends, normie friends, who are not into crypto, Web3, not in technology. In fact, just last evening. And so, they are not even aware about what Web3 is, and they don't care about the security. So probably like how we use extra security for our own computers because we are too much into this. But when I spoke to them about, that you can use a lot of cloud storage, decentralized, they were still skeptical about it, saying that, it is not very safe. I really don't know how it functions. And is it even real? So you have been into this business from a very, very long time. What are the two or probably top three misconceptions which you have heard people talking about decentralization and cloud storage, which you think are not correct, and maybe even funny for you and me, which we never, but these are real problems which probably people don't know about it. So we need to create some sort of awareness. So what are your top 2 or 3 misconceptions which people have about cloud and decentralization?
Yeah. There's definitely a lot to unpack there. This is something that, I've been trying to figure out for the past 5 years, right? The misconceptions, clarifying those, just educating people in general, explaining it, right? Explaining and going through ArDrive as an app versus RIO as a network. Decentralized infrastructure is also like very different. I think talking to, a normie, or I don't know, someone who's not in it, or your mom, or, someone like that. I think it starts with, the fundamental of like permanent storage, right? and how that could impact you. So if you ever lost anything digital, you ever click on a link that was not found or wasn't there anymore, right? Like that's what we're trying to solve. So, we're trying to ensure that data, that's online stays online, right? So you make a choice to publish it. We want it to stay there. We want to make an internet that doesn't forget, right? And you can use an app like ArDrive, which makes that super easy. It's like Dropbox, but there's no subscriptions. And once you upload something, you can't delete it. It's there permanently, or build all kinds of things. So I feel like with that as, the explanation, and maybe sure you can get into how people don't understand that when you put your files in the cloud or in Apple or Microsoft, AWS, it's like their terms of service. It's sure they offer lots of protections and reliability, but they own that data, and it's not in your control, and it's bound to that single location or place. And we're trying to go the opposite of that, where you, as the creator of that data, own it. So now, what are the maybe misconceptions that we've seen? I mean, one big one is, well, how could this be real? Like, so that's like the first thing people, probably think, well, it's permanent. How do you guarantee 200 plus years? And there's, of course, lots of nuances to that. And sure, if, catastrophic things were to happen to the earth, right? Like there's things that could ruin the system. But I think there's a really convincing case to make about the economics of both hard drive costs going down and open protocols lasting very long time on the internet and being hard to shut off. And I guess we'll see what happens over the next 100, 200 years, but these open protocols can last longer than single companies because they have entire communities of teams, people, et cetera, working to keep them alive versus single entities. I think that, and the fact that it's been around for now 8 years, Arweave, it gives me hope that, we're truly building a system that will meet this standard of, 200 plus years of storage. But that's obviously a big, a misconception, but like some people might just be turned off by that and not ever want to go beyond it. So we're constantly trying to educate and, let people know the details of how the permanence works. I think another big misconception is, it's decentralized, it must be slow. How does permanence work? How could that be a thing? You guys are a startup. How are you guaranteeing this? So that's a big one for like someone who's not in Web3, maybe. If you are in Web3 or know about decentralized technology, or maybe don't, like another big question or misconception is, well, how is it fast? Like, how does this thing scale? Like, is this just experimental technology, or is it slow or hard to use? Maybe that was true 5 years ago. But now with our SDKs, platforms, tooling, ArDrive is being a main example. The ArNS app itself, very easy to use. You could just use a credit card for all of these things, by the way. So I know, like, buying an RNS name, sure, you have to spend RAO tokens, or uploading data. The network accepts AR tokens, Arweave tokens, but we've built a layer above that to just accept credit cards. So the things are very easy to use. And really, one of the main functions of the RAO network is to make all of this scale and be very fast for apps like ArDrive or just general consumption of data. And that's because, they're built with CDNs in front of them, right? So any of these 600 access points could optimize their own stack, and many of them have, fast CDNs in front of them, and decent hardware. So, maybe in the past it wasn't as performant, but the network is in a solid position. I think another misconception is, maybe you need to be technical to use it, which again is not true. There's, I've mentioned them several times already: ArDrive, ArLink, MetaLinks, just to name a few. Bizarre, Listen, many apps to upload data and use it right? Consumer retail grade apps. Sure, there might be some edges. Let's be honest, there's no team the size of Dropbox building an app, on RIO. But you don't have to be technical to use it. You need to maybe be open to learn some new phrases like a wallet. In some cases, in some apps, they're even obfuscating stuff like that. So very easy to use, and again, the performance is what you would expect. So it's not like the app is easy to use, but then it doesn't work or it doesn't get uploaded or things like that. You just need to kind of care about the control that you have, the permanence, the resilience, the censorship resistance, the provenance. Like if you don't care about any of those things, then it's a hard sell to use or build with any of it. And I guess maybe the last thing is, I don't know, people might think that it's this decentralized network of nodes and it's kind of, who knows what's happening, and they're just miners out there. And it's kind of like this chaos. But in reality, they're all following different open source protocols. They're observing one another. They're kind of checking things. That's how the other reward mechanisms for the RIO network come into place. The nodes on the network are staked in, so they've kind of put skin in the game to participate. And on top of that, we're building even more protocols. And technically the nodes themselves are already doing this, but we're increasing our protocols to help with the verification of all that data. We just launched one called Wayfinder. We have a little Google Chrome extension that you can use it, but it allows any client or server to route to any of the gateways on the network. It's a simple routing and hash checking protocol. So it verifies that data. So you could go to AR:// your name, like R Drive or Abhishek. You don't need to know which location, which domain. You just need to know your name. And this protocol routes you to one of those gateways. So again, it needs to be as simple as like HTTPS, right? Everyone uses HTTPS, and it's not like you have to be technical to use that. So we're trying to build these protocols to, I guess, control the chaos, verify things, ensure nodes are doing what they are supposed to do, and then basically give that power to any single user. Maybe that gets into a browser one day. Obviously, it'd be hard to use HTTPS if browsers didn't support it. But yeah, so a lot of misconceptions, and over the years we tried to figure out how to clear them up as fast as we can.
Absolutely. So you spoke about HTTPS, and I'm sure, so to all the viewers who are listening or seeing this podcast, we are currently at an all-time high of Bitcoin of around 118K, and next week I think is a crypto week in US, which is happening. So which I think these things are bringing crypto, Web3 in the mainstream, and definitely we have seen the whole ETF coming into picture from last few months, and everybody talks about Bitcoin, everybody knows about crypto. But let's imagine that what will internet look like if R.io and if it becomes this whole permanent data storage goes mainstream and people start realizing that what they have been missing, and I'm sure this is something which you guys have been working towards. What do you think would internet look like in next 5 to 10 years if this becomes mainstream, everybody starts using it?
Yeah, it's think about that question a lot. We wrote a little vision article a few months ago that tries to describe that 5-year kind of what we see it, where we see it going. 10 years is like even hard. I feel like it's hard, right? That the pace technology is advancing. There's some things I like to look back on and imagine like, wow, imagine if there was an internet where this didn't happen. Like for example, I don't know if you remember the late 90s, early 2000s, or even mid 90s, right? Making the first websites, making your first site on GeoCities or your first blog or something. Maybe you might have downloaded them, but they probably don't exist anymore. So it's like, all right, yeah, that would be cool if that stuff, again, like 404s just were a thing of the past, right? And if, there was an internet that, never forgot things and those links were truly resilient, maybe we would start going the other direction with the amount of link rot that is happening. There's been so many studies now about this. I'll probably botch the stats. It's probably like 20 to 30% of all links on the internet, or, links in academic journals, or, law and court case documents. Like, these links are just breaking because, if 10 documents are relying on a single source and that source goes down, it's very, it could spread really quick. So starting to prevent that, right, is another. It's like, all right, losing your own personal blogs, that's nice, but now losing more important information, that's even more important. Okay, now let's say, now this world of AI, what does that mean? If we lose important information on the internet, AI, unless it's already scanned it, or again, harvesting it or something like that, you start to lose context about human history, culture, and now whether those links rotted or that data was lost on accident or on purpose due to censorship, or trying to delete, again, certain culture. Now the AI has less to scan, right? Future generations have less to look back on, right? Because all this information that's on this permanent web is timestamped, right? And it's tamper proof, and it has a record of provenance going back to some digital identity who uploaded it. So, you can really go and see what has happened in the past, and when, and who did it. And that could be that the AI models themselves could benefit from this. So it's like, you have this, future where probably tons of content is created by AIs and consumed. And now, do you want a web where that's opaque and you don't know what's going on and stuff could just come and go? Or do you want a web not replacing it, right, but sitting alongside it, maybe transparent to the user, right, that has permanence and immutability and provenance, and gives this extra layer to see really what's going on, and that will just persist, right? So, I think if like RIO, wins, or if all, these decentralized networks, and, you point about Bitcoin, that's really setting the way, right? Because I see that as like for money, right? What we're doing is like for data, or the internet, whatever. So if this wins, it just, we move away from these concepts of renting storage and renting, web services, to owning them, running them yourself, right? Is another big thing I hopefully see happen more. Like, maybe, people start participating in these networks more, the everyday person. I think we're further away from that, but I would love to see more just general retail participation in running the servers for these things. So, we'll see if, this internet becomes a reality, but I do think, in the long term, it's got massive benefits, and, we could see what happens, in these critical moments of society where if we can delete mass amounts of data, burn books, things like that, if we can prevent those things from happening, we build systems, protocols that prevent those things from happening. I think we could all agree that, it would make for, better society overall. So
Absolutely.
kind of big visual, maybe.
As you said, I just remember that I had created a blog probably 15 years back on blogspot.com, and I really don't know if blogspot.com still exists or no, but probably I'll check. If it is still there, it would be fun to read what I used to think probably 15 years back. And I think what you're trying to do is you're trying to preserve the history, because what we are building currently, it will only stay on internet. We are not going to write any more new books, and there's no way to preserve that. So I think what you're doing has a bigger purpose rather than just what currently we are thinking. So if that can be a narrative shift, I think people will definitely would like to move to a permanent solution currently. Moving on to our last question, Phil, and we spoke a lot about what you guys are building, how storing data on chain can help, but what are some of the technical mistakes, for example, if any developers or builders who are listening to this podcast, or they're watching this video, is that they should avoid to use while they are using Arweave or they are building on R.io? So what would be that?
So I guess when it comes to maybe like Web3 developers, NFT creators, artists, whatever, a big, my opinion, technical mistake to avoid is, assuming protocols like IPFS equal long-term persistence of your data. Even before that, we see a lot of developers, particularly in the NFT area, just not even caring where the data is even stored. So I think that's technical mistake number one to avoid. If you say you're doing anything in Web3, and whether that's NFTs or building an app or front end, and your data is on centralized platforms that can just go away if you forget the bill or something happens, your project goes away. That's a mistake. Avoid that. NFTs, we see, again, someone forgets to pay the bill. The NFT tokens that are worth X amount of money now are four not pounds. Right. So a level beyond that, don't assume that IPFS gives you that permanence. Sure, it's better than just storing on S3, for example. But don't assume that IPFS gives you that same amount. So that's a second piece. I would also think about how you're referencing that data, right? So this goes back to what I was saying about protocols like Wayfinder. So now we have a way where you could access content across any location. So you don't want to hard code your links. You don't want to say, load this picture from arweave.net/transaction ID, or even Abhishek.arweave.net, right? If arweave.net were to go down, you have a 404, you have a broken link.
Oh, okay.
So, and this is new. Nobody else is doing this or has these tools, but we're really trying to encourage developers to build with these new protocols. So your content loads fast and also has this resilience, right? Because the same website that can be served out of arweave.net can be served out of 599 other gateways, right? Independent of any single location. So, I think that's a technical mistake to avoid. If you want your content to really live, or your links to other things to really live, use routing protocols like Wayfinder, right? So I would maybe say those are a couple big ones. Use permanent storage, and then route to it accordingly.
Right. And Phil, just one more last question. So when, for example, let's say if I'm not a technical person, I'm a creator. So what would be your startup tips for creator or founders who are looking to shift from a traditional cloud storage? And while we were recording, guys, for this podcast, there had been a lot of technical challenges. In fact, we were using one platform where suddenly things were happening. So I think that's also an interesting learning experience for me. So as a creator, what would be your 3 quick tips if I want to move from a traditional cloud storage to a permanent storage and on RIN? Probably I will become a permanent customer of RI because I've seen this happen twice in the last few days. So what would be your tips here for creators and founders?
Yeah. So, first, grab an ArNS name, right? It's your permanent brand, or it's the start of your permanent brand. Really easy, arns.ar.io. You can use a credit card or pay with RIO tokens if you have them, but definitely start with that. I would say, then try out Arweave, right? It's really easy to use. You can use that same identity as you've made your name with, and you don't have to get your name first. You could try out Arweave first. There's really no right order. But I would give that a shot, and think about what's something that's really important that you want to store forever. It doesn't have to be like, all right, let's move my whole portfolio or everything over. Just start small, whether that's a single file or a page, right? Arweave, it's, Dropbox, but it's got publishing capabilities. So you could put your website on there, and then you could assign it to that name, right? So I think that's, step one and two, maybe, that I would recommend. Because then once you have that, once you've done that, you have your digital identity, you have your permanent domain, you have some permanent content, you have a link you can start to share around and show your friends, family, team, whomever. You'd be able to go and see all the underlying provenance and transaction information. And, I think it's like those simple things, getting a name and uploading some data, really, you get like 80% there with all the things, and then sure, you could, if you're really, want to go deeper, you can then learn more. Go to docs.ar.io, right? And see like, okay, there's these SDKs, or ArNS names can be expanded in this way, or, there's a lot of things you can ultimately do, right? Because it is not just, but it starts from this level of permanent storage, and then RIO gives you these other cloud services that you can work with. So, naming and uploading are just two of those. But highly recommend starting with that. And, let us know how it works for you.
But definitely, guys, those who are listening to this podcast and watching this, do check out Phil, and I will put the website links also in the description. I think it's an amazing product. And in fact, in the last 2-3 days, I've also realized that how cloud, you can't rely too much on the clouds, which are not permanent. So yeah, do try out. And thank you for coming on the show, Phil. Wishing you guys all the best. And as I said, you guys are solving a real problem of saving our history, our culture, which is going to happen on internet now, and how to put it permanently on cloud. So yeah, thank you very much. And those who are listening to this, I'll be back with a new set of guests here and a new topic. So thank you for watching Voice of Crypto.
Thanks for having me, Abhishek. It's a pleasure to be here.